Good afternoon and welcome to another lecture of this self-knowledge course. Today we'll be studying the lecture Life and the Level of the Being. We will be learning how to transform our lives by raising our level of being. We will discover how we can change our external situations by working on our interior. Well, certainly we ignore the reason for our existence. Who are we? Where do we come from? Where are we going? What do we live for? Why do we live? Unquestionably, the poor intellectual animal, mistakenly called man, not only doesn't know, but also he doesn't even know that he doesn't know. Worst of all is the very difficult and strange situation in which we find ourselves. We ignore the secret of all our tragedies, and yet we are convinced that we know everything. The intellectual humanoid, us, although he boasts of being strong and believes himself to be a man deep down, he is frighteningly weak. We think of ourselves the best. We believe that we can develop wonderfully through kindergarten, urbanity manuals, elementary schools, high school, university, the good prestige of our father, etc., etc. Unfortunately, after so many letters and good manners, titles and money, we well know that any stomach ache makes us sad and that deep down we continue to be unhappy and miserable. And check this. It is enough to read universal history to know that we are the same barbarians of yesteryear and that instead of improving, we have become worse. This 20th century, with all its spectacularity, wars, prostitution, worldwide sodomy, degeneration, sexual abuse, drugs, alcohol, cruelty, extreme perversity, etc., etc., is the mirror in which we must look at ourselves. There is therefore no compelling reason to boast of having reached a higher stage of development, even though we believe that we are technologically advanced. To think that time means progress is absurd. Unfortunately, the ignorant enlightened continue bottled in the dogma of evolution. We have many people believing that we are going soon to ascend to a higher dimension as part of the process of evolution, as if it doesn't exist the involution law. In all the black pages of Black history, we always find the same horrifying cruelties, ambitions, wars. However, our super civilized contemporaries, they are still convinced that this war is something secondary, a passing accident that has nothing to do with their vaunted modern civilization. Certainly, what matters is the way of being of each person. Some people will be drunkards, others tattoo dealers, those honest and these others scoundrels. This is, there is everything in life, and they form the mass. The mass is the sum of the individuals. What is the individual is the mass. The mass is therefore the extension of the individual. The transformation of the masses, of the people, is not possible if the individual, if each person does not transform himself. We tend to believe ourselves superior to other people on this planet and criticize them for their ways of being, for their actions, for their defects, for how evil they are. And the reality is that we are part of the mass of this planet because at one level or another, we all have the same flaws, the same defects. And if we want to get out of that mass, we have to eliminate everything that makes us part of it. Everything that makes us vibrate with it. And we do that by raising the level of being. No one can deny that there are different social levels. There are people from the church and from the brothel, etc., etc. Thus, there are also different levels of being. The level of being is a moral level, is what we are really is what we is what we really are on the inside, regardless of the external appearances we may have. What we are internally, splendid or petty, generous or stingy, violent or peaceful, chaste or lustful, attracts the various circumstances of our life. A lustful person will always attract scenes, dramas, and even tragedies of lasciviousness in which he will find himself involved. A drunk will attract drunkards and will always find himself involved in bars and canteens. That is obvious. So, what attracts the usurer, the egoist? How many problems, jails, misfortunes, etc., etc.? What happened to them yesterday happens to them today and will happen to them tomorrow. They always repeat the same mistakes and do not learn the lessons of life. All things are repeated in their own life. They say the same things, they do the same things, they regret the same things. This boring repetition of dramas, comedies, and tragedies will continue as long as we carry within ourselves the undesirable elements of anger, greed, lust, envy, pride, laziness, gluttony, etc., etc. All things, all the circumstances that take place outside of us on the stage of this world are exclusively the reflection of what we carry inside. With just reason, we can solemnly assert that the exterior is the reflection of the interior. When we change internally, and such a change is radical, the exterior, the circumstances, the life change too. So, what is our moral level? Or rather, we would say, what is our level of being? As long as the level of the being does not radically change, the repetition of all our miseries, sins, misfortunes will continue. Very often we have difficult situations with family, with work, with our couple, and we tend to think that we are going to change it only by changing jobs or couples. But we are unaware that wherever we go or whoever we are with, we carry the same psychological burden within us. And by doing this, we do not stop repeating the same mistakes and circumstances and attracting the same kind of people into our lives. So, if we really want a radical change, what we must first understand is what level of being we are at. What we must first understand with complete clarity is that each one of us, whether be proletarian or middle class, rich or miserable, is really in such or such a level of being. We must ask ourselves, what is our level of being? It would not be possible to go to another level if we ignore the level we are currently in. The level of being of the drunkard is different from that one of the Tito dealer, and that of the prostitute very different from that of the maiden. How could we know what our level of being is? Let's start first saying that through self-observation of oneself. But since this sense is so atrophied in us, we can observe everything that is closest to us. This is how the law of attraction really works, attracting what is related to us. Let's see what is around us, in what circumstances we find ourselves, what kind of people surround us. We find ourselves in circumstances of poverty, constantly having conflicts. We surround ourselves with drunks and drug addicts, critics, hypocritical people, fights, etc., etc. That is our level of being. Look at your partner, your neighborhood, your neighbors, your friends, your family. What are their qualities, their defects or virtues? And you will find your level of being. This is not, of course, to criticize others, just to acknowledge the level you are currently in order to raise it. Once our level of being has been discovered, we must eliminate all the defects that manifest at that level. That is the only way to move to another higher level. Another level that will, of course, bring its own problems and conflicts and certain people, and that we will have to overcome in the same way. For example, if I find my closest neighbor to be very gossip, I need to work on that defect within myself, even though I am in the passive pole of that defect, which is the one that hates and criticizes the gossips. It doesn't matter. It's the same defect, but different polarities. If I find my partner, my couple, to be very lazy, I need to work laziness within myself. If my boss is a tyrant, I have to work that defect on me. If I am in a situation of misery, I have to work my greedy and wasteful defects, and so on. If I am always in situations of conflicts, I have to work my defects of anger, and so on. Working from your interior, you'll realize how you can change your exterior. We have to long for real change, to get out of this boring routine of this life, merely mechanistic, tiresome, since sometimes we are attached to our current level of being. We must recognize those defects within us, stop feeling like victims, and start taking responsibility for our lives and our circumstances. If we are in a certain circumstance, it's due to the defects and that we have, and the karma those defects have generated to us. Now let's imagine a ladder that extends from bottom to top, vertically, and with many steps. Unquestionably, we find ourselves on some of these steps. Downstairs, there will be people worse than us. Upstairs, there will be people better than us. In this extraordinary vertical, in this marvelous stairway, it is clear that we can find all the levels of being. Each person is different, and no one can refute this. Undoubtedly, we are not talking now about ugly or pretty faces or talking about age, okay? There are young and old people who are ready to die, and newborn children. The question of time and years, that of being born, growing, marrying, reproducing, growing old, and dying, is exclusive to the horizontal. In the marvelous staircase, in the vertical, the concept of time does not fit. On the steps of such a scale, we can only find levels of being. The mechanical hope of people is useless. They believe that with time, things will be better. This is how our grandparents and great-grandparents thought, and the facts have precisely come to demonstrate the opposite. The level of being is what counts, and this is vertical. We are on a step, but we can go up to another step. The marvelous ladder of which we are speaking, in which refers to the different levels of being, certainly has nothing to do with linear time. A higher level of being is immediately above us from moment to moment. It is not in any remote horizontal future, but here and now, within ourselves, in the vertical. It is important that anyone can understand that the two lines, horizontal and vertical, meet from moment to moment in our psychological interior and form a cross. The personality develops in the horizontal line of life. It is born and dies within its linear time. It is perishable. There is no tomorrow for the personality of the dead. The levels of being, the being itself, is not of time. It has nothing to do with the horizontal line. It is within ourselves now, in the vertical. Unquestionably, such a point is never in the past, nor in the future, but in the present. Whoever wants to discover the mysterious point must look for it here and now, within himself. Exactly at this moment, not a second ahead, not a second behind. The vertical and horizontal poles of the Holy Cross meet at this point. We find ourselves then from moment to moment before two paths, the horizontal and the vertical. Most people walk on the horizontal line. It is evident that the vertical is different. It is the path of the intelligent, the rebels, that of the revolutionaries. When we remember ourselves, we live in a state of self-observation, and when we work on ourselves, we don't identify with all the problems and sorrows of life. In fact, we are following the vertical path. It is certainly never an easy task to eliminate negative emotions, lose all identification with our own way of life, problems of all kinds, business, debts, payment of bills, the telephone, water, electricity, etc., etc. The unemployed, those who for this or that reason have lost their jobs, obviously suffer from lack of money, and they forget themselves. They identify with their own problem. Those who suffer, those who cry, those who have been victims of some betrayal, of a bad payment in life, of ingratitude, slander, or some fraud, they truly forget themselves. Their real intimate being, they completely identify with their moral tragedy, forgetting their own being. Working on oneself is the fundamental characteristic of the vertical path. No one could tread the path of the Great Rebellion if they never work on themselves. The work to which we are referring here is of a psychological type. It deals with certain transformation of the present moment in which we find ourselves. We need to learn to live from moment to moment. For example, a person who is desperate due to some sentimental, economic, or political problem has obviously forgotten himself. If such a person stops for a moment, if he observes the situation and tries to remember himself, and then makes an effort to understand the meaning of his attitude, if he reflects a little, if he thinks that everything happens and that life is illusory, fleeting, and that death reduces all the vanities of the world to ashes, if he understands that his problem is basically nothing more than a will-o'-the-wisp that soon goes out, he will suddenly see with surprise that everything has changed. But as long as he continues there crying and suffering, everything is going to stay the same. So, as we saw, the basis for raising the levels of being is psychological depth, eliminating each one of our negative ways of being, raising our levels of being. The next thing we are going to do is merge these levels of being into levels of consciousness. The levels of being will allow us to change our own lives, but the levels of consciousness are what will bring us closer to our own being, to our inner God. And those levels of consciousness are seen in our spine. And to scale those levels of consciousness, we are going to do it through the practice of suprasex, in which we are going to make those sparks of consciousness that we have been rescuing from the ego ascend through our spinal column. Psychological death is going to be the basis for ascent and spiritual birth, achieved with the practice of suprasex, which is going to give us the hate. And if we practice sacrifice for humanity, teaching others how to change their lives, then that love will serve as the impetus to ascend faster. Transforming mechanical reactions is possible through logical confrontation and intimate self-reflection of the being. It is evident that people react mechanically to the various circumstances of life. They always tend to become victims. When someone flatters them, they smile. When they are humiliated, they suffer. They insult if they are insulted. They hurt if they are hurt. They are never free. Their fellow men have power to lead them from joy to sadness, from hope to despair. Each one of those people who follow the horizontal path resembles a musical instrument, where each one of their peers plays what they want. That one who learns to transform the mechanical reactions actually enters the vertical path. This represents a fundamental change in the level of being, which is an extraordinary result of the psychological rebellion. To finish today's lecture, we need to know that identifying ourselves with the things of life prevents us from raising levels of the being, but criticism makes us lower the levels of being that we had already present. Example, if my level of being was that of an alcoholic addict, I raise my level of being and understand all the people who are slaves to alcohol by eliminating that defect. But if instead of understanding and, I start criticizing the people that are still in that level or a level that is lower than mine, by law of equalization, I will return to their level and I will begin to attract those people and circumstances into my life again because of criticism, lack of understanding, and love. Okay, because all these things lower our level of being. Also, if you make the mistake of criticizing someone who is at a higher level of being than you, then as a consequence, you will end up going down to the levels of being from where that person drew the wisdom and consciousness to ascend. So, it is important to understand that criticism only shows a lack of understanding and a lack of consciousness. Therefore, if we want to continue ascending more and more our levels of being, we must learn not to criticize. And well, thank you very much for being here. This being the lecture for today. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments section. And also, let me invite you to the next conference where we will learn what is esotericism, what is really esotericism, and how can we differentiate it from the pseudo-esotericism that is so abundant today in many spiritual schools or religions. So thank you very much. Bye. Until next time.